The gray zone, where grooming lives. There's a question that keeps surfacing in parent groups, in quiet conversations, at after school events, and in the messages most people don't send. Is this something, or am I reading too much into it? That moment, hesitation paired with some sort of aching instinct, is where grooming often takes hold. Not in the obvious, but in the explainable. Not in what shocks, but in what slides quietly by. Hello, my name is Anna Sonoda, licensed clinical social worker, and welcome to Known and Trusted. We've been trained to look for red flags. The problem is that grooming rarely announces itself that way. It begins in what feels reasonable, acceptable, helpful. A coach who stays a little bit later, a teacher who pays a little more attention, a family friend who becomes a little more central to our family. Each interaction stands on its own. Together, they start to shift the structure of a relationship, of our connection to someone. Research has long supported this pattern. Studies synthesized by the National Sexual Violence Resource Center and the nonprofit Darkness to Light both show that most child sexual abuse is preceded by a period of grooming that normalizes increased access, builds emotional reliance, and gradually reduces oversight. The behavior doesn't escalate in a straight line. It accumulates, builds over time. That accumulation is what I call the gray zone. It's where behavior remains defensible while something more consequential is taking place. As we've talked about before, grooming is not one single moment, but a process. It is about taking the relationship or the connection in a certain direction. There are three elements that I want us to focus on today to help us define that direction. The first is pattern. A one-off interaction rarely carries meaning, but repetition, on the other hand, does. The adult or the older child who consistently finds reasons to connect, to check in, to touch, to create moments of proximity, that is a pattern. Second is persistence, attention that continues, even subtly at times, but expands. It doesn't need to be intense at first to be effective. It needs to be steady. The third is positioning. This is often overlooked. The question isn't whether someone is being kind, it's whether they are being kind in order to be reciprocated in some way. It's whether they are becoming significant in a way that changes the child's relational center of gravity. That shift often unfolds under the cover of something that looks like care, tenderness, or mentorship. Researchers in developmental psychology have noted that children are particularly responsive to adults who provide individualized attention and emotional attunement, especially in environments where achievement, accomplishment, performance, and belonging are on the line. Offenders understand this greatly, and grooming often mirrors what good mentoring can look like until it doesn't. This is why families can often get stuck. Each individual behavior can be reasoned away. It can be explained. There are sometimes very reasonable interpretations available within a school, within a sports league, within a community that all justify this time spent. This creates what amounts to a structural advantage. The burden of proof doesn't sit on the offender. The burden of proof sits with the parent, while the behavior itself avoids scrutiny. Online discourse reflects this tension greatly. Parents are asking themselves about the slow drift towards privacy. Direct messages that begin as logistical from a coach or a mentor and become personal over time. Moments alone that start to feel routine. A sense that a connection is deepening faster than expected. This becomes even easier when we take the concept of isolation with the size of the devices children are using, the fact that they often are having those devices in private spaces like bedrooms and bathrooms and are supported through things like headphones or AirPods to further disconnect them from the world around them and connect them to a potential offender. We need to be attuned to this pattern before trust your gut has become solid advice, and I'm hearing it constantly. But, as we've discussed before, it is incredibly incomplete. What people often call intuition is the brain registering a change in trajectory, something moving, accumulating, going somewhere. A more useful question is, what is this building towards? That question shifts the frame of reference. It moves the focus from isolated behavior to relational dynamics, relational direction, if you will, because grooming is not a single decision point. It is a gradual reorganization of access and influence. Grooming does not move the line, it blurs the line. Communication becomes more private. Time together becomes more normalized. Supervision becomes diminished. The adult or older child's role becomes less peripheral and more central. None of this requires secrecy, at least not at the beginning. In fact, early transparency can make the process more effective. It lowers defenses of parents, caregivers, and other adults within an ecosystem around that child. It builds credibility. But by the time concern surfaces, the connection often feels established. It feels as if it is a relationship. Data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention underscores how frequently abuse occurs within known relationships, not outside of them. Familiarity is not incidental, it is foundational. For parents, this creates a particularly challenging task, a kind of bind, if you will. Attentive, thoughtful, caring adults are less inclined to act on incomplete information. In fact, they go out of their way to give people the benefit of the doubt. They weigh, they consider, they think about the consequences of being suspicious. Those are strengths in most areas of life. However, in this context, can often delay or paralyze response. The shift is subtle, but so very important. Instead of asking whether something is serious enough, consider whether it is directional, if it is moving somewhere. For example, is access increasing? Is influence deepening? Is the relationship becoming more isolated or exclusive? Those questions can bring about clarity without requiring adult or child certainty. There's no need for dramatic conclusions. Often a small adjustment is enough. Reintroducing visibility in the form of advanced structure or supervision, resetting communication expectations and standards, rebalancing who holds influence in the child's life, redrawing expectations on the part of institutions or activities that seem outside of the standard expected protocols. The goal here is not our suspicion or our paralysis. It is about our orientation. Grooming is selective, intentional, incremental, and observable. It relies on space where something can continue because it has yet been named out loud. Once you can recognize the pattern, You are no longer in that space of paralysis. If you found this episode helpful, send it on to somebody else who's also parenting, or send it to someone who works as a mentor, whether in schools, sports, or activities with youth. If you need more support with understanding the grooming concepts at more length, check out Duck Duck Groom, Understanding How a Child Becomes a Target. If you're seeking a resource to use with your elementary age children, check out the latest book, Wait, That's Weird, to start the dialogue in your home based on your expectations, based on your family's standards. Coming up next month, I'll be visiting Las Vegas for CrimeCon 2026. Please come by and say hello. It would be wonderful to meet you there in order to discuss and help spread the message of grooming awareness for children and adults serving them. My name is Anna Sonoda, and this has been another episode of Known and Trusted. As always, show up, look up, and speak up.